All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Alex Cron. I am BPOC's Digital Operations and Collections Information Analyst. It has been a while since our last Dreaming of DAM webinar, which was on digital preservation and access. For those of you who are just joining us, we, BPOC, have been running Dreaming of series since the end of 2020. This series started out with this idea of holding community conversations around the various technologies arts and culture professionals use. And if you've worked with BPOC before, then you know that part of our discovery process includes this sort of therapy sessions. So in a way, these webinars have been continuing and expanding those sessions to broader audiences. Providing an opportunity for folks to not only learn from each other, but in a lot of cases, we have heard from folks mention that they don't feel so alone in their struggles. Since we started the series, we've had quite a few conversations around collections management systems, focusing on challenges and opportunities around managing collections information. Then last year, we moved to digital asset management systems and those challenges and opportunities around managing digital assets. Now, this year, we are focusing more specifically on collection images and information, their presentation, and the website redesign projects that make it possible. All of our webinars are free, as you know. We record each session and post them publicly on our YouTube channel as an educational resource for the GLANS community. Now, before we get started, I do want to mention that we ask that you put any questions you have in the Q&A section. Please feel free to use the chat for comments and discussion, or just say hi to me, Jack, and Eileen if you worked with us before. Now, I would like to introduce our esteemed guest speakers today. Today, we have Jack Ludden and Eileen Willis with us. Jack is a cultural heritage expert who builds open and collaborative work environments by bridging experts from different fields of interest. Jack has been a leader in the cultural heritage community for more than 30 years as a digital advocate, communication specialist, and a user experience expert at organizations such as the Getty, Disney, and the Showa Visual History Foundation. Currently, Jack is working with the dynamic and talented team at Balboa Park Online Collaborative as a digital experience and innovation strategist. He is also the collections management director for the Sandor Family Collection and an adjunct professor at Northwestern University. Jack is an active board member of the Book Truck and Northwestern's Alumni Association. Now we have Eileen, who has more than 20 years experience working on digital projects for global arts and culture organizations, including the Brooklyn Museum, the International Center for Photography, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts, and Qatar Museums. As the current head of digital content for Qatar Museums, she leads a team of English and Arabic language specialists who create content in support of a national network of museums. Sorry, excuse me. Heritage sites, galleries, creative hubs, and creative projects, including the National Museum of Qatar, the Museum of Islamic Art, Mataf Arab Museum of Modern Arts, and 321 Qatar Olympic and Sports Museum. I hope I said that right, Eileen.
Yes, all good.
All right, perfect. In addition to several other groundbreaking cultural initiatives. I apologize, everyone. I am getting over being sick right now, so if I do break my voice break, I'm sorry for that. Now, you both have worked on a number of website redesign projects as consultants, including with BPOC. With your experiences, could you share a favorite project or projects that you've worked on, your role, how the project went, and what you took away from it? And conversely, if you're willing to share a challenging project that you worked on that you have advice or recommendations you'd like to impart for folks who may be getting ready to dive into a new collections presentation and or website redesign project themselves. Jack, why don't we go ahead and start with you, and then we'll bring Eileen in.
Perfect. That sounds great. Alex, thank you, and feel better. I totally get trying to get over something. We'll just do song and dance with if you start coughing. Just put yourself on mute, and we got you covered. Hey everybody, it's good to be here today. So, Alex, I will answer your questions. I'm probably going to do it a little in bits and pieces along the way, but I promise I will happily throw dirt on lots of projects. So don't worry about that. I'll tell you all the stuff.
The floor is yours. Go for it.
What's that?
The floor is yours. Go for it.
Okay, great. So here I go. I got 54 minutes to tell you all the horrendous things that can happen. No, all good. So this is therapy session, right? I mean, that's the reality. And of course, part of the secret of that is that it's therapy session as much for us as it is for you all, right? And so I do honestly love that, that metaphor, because a lot, when you're thinking about like large projects, like a redesign, or like how do you modify or update your collections online, right? It's a huge undertaking, and there's lots of different ways to approach it. And so the reality is, so part of me was thinking like, okay, where do I start? And right, you start at the beginning, whatever that might mean. So, and for me, starting at the beginning is to sort of telescope out a little bit. So I just wanted to hit on some, like, I just wanted to sort of position this whole thing with some perspective, and then provide a level of detail. And then, like I said, sooner rather than later, start hitting on some of the positives and some of the negatives that happen sort of along the way. And I'll go into some of these with a bit more detail. So it's not that I'm just going to sort of read the slide and then move on. I just want to sort of give you, again, sort of a positioning statement here. I want to make a fair number of assumptions, but I also want to make sure that I say those out loud, right? So again, when you're thinking about doing a redesign, well, what do you need, right? And so in that bottom left-hand corner, you see some, strategies, right? A website strategy, dare I say it, you need it before you build it, right? And so one of the themes that you're going to hear from me, and my guess is from Eileen as well, is that sort of pre-production and structure is your friend, right? And so as much as you will also hear me say how important brainstorming and sort of horizon scan and all that kind of good stuff of like what's out there and what are you trying to accomplish, you need some level of structure. And a lot of that starts with strategy. So the notion of a website strategy, an audience engagement strategy, a digital strategy, right? Right? You need all of those things. And so if you feel like some of those are weak or misleading or unclear, or maybe you haven't been dusted off for a number of years, that's where you want to start. So starting can be different for lots of different organizations, but you need those elements, right? Similar, right? And you've kind of heard this already in sort of how I've positioned it, right? Like you want to have the notion of a project plan. Like what does the project look like? What is the beginning? What is the middle, the end? Again, maybe that feels very obvious, but boy, does it need to be written down and with a whole lot of clarity around it. Project teams. The other one I like to sort of say out loud, and I know Alex and I have dealt with this over the years, is the project a priority, right? Is the redesign, for example, the collection, modifying the collections online, is that a priority? Is it a priority just for you? Is it a priority just for your team? Is it a priority for the entire organization? And I think we all know that can be different, right? Those answers can be different. And you want to, as best as possible, right? You want to have there be a level of unification on that, if at all possible. I'm going to underscore the internal communications right now. I have really good examples. I have good memories of many projects where the internal communications could not have been kinder, more informative, right? It was an incredibly valuable asset to the entire project. Do not take that as an assumption, right? You want to have a very clear notion as to how you're creating an internal communications plan. And I don't mean just within the team. I also just mean across the entire organization. How are you letting your peers and your colleagues know where this project is going and where it is at the time? There's a level of stress with that, which I think, again, many of us can attest to. but it's important to put that stuff down in writing and be very clear around it, right? Internal plan, all of the things I'm talking about are like, how do you use analytics? How do you use data to help build the internal plan? And I'll get to that in a little bit more. Decision-making tree. All right, I suppose this is me. I won't call out the specific project, but I will just call this out as a specific problem. Numerous times, we all think it's, well, the group will figure the decision out. That's a red flag right there, right? So you want to have, again, and I would recommend writing it down, be very clear as to how decisions are made and ultimately how they get maintained going forward. It is so incredibly important to understand how those decisions are being made. And a horizon scan, I'm going to get to that in a little bit. So clearly, there's only a handful of people who sort of know me well here right now, right? But so, and I say that because I love to brainstorm. I love to be iterative in the process. I think that is such an incredibly valuable element to doing a redesign. But the only way that innovation and at some point creativity can really flourish is if you have a level of structure to what you're trying to do. And so this boring slide represents what those things are, right? You really need to be, that this pre-production work, and at least what I'm referring to as pre-production work, is so important. Really, I can't underscore the preparation that you pretty much can't over prepare for this, right? And so this idea, I've already mentioned the notion of the goals and strategies that are necessary. Again, you want to articulate those, right? We have Eileen here who's going to sort of talk through a number of issues, most notably contents. So I'm going to pause. I'm going to skip over that one for a moment. But the notion of, again, planning and sort of understanding what the roles and responsibilities are, again, are essential, right? So the roles and responsibilities, we used to live in a world where, right, you had a bunch of technology people who were doing the development, who were building the website or doing the collection pages. Those days are done, right? That is not the world that we live in. And so when you talk about project teams and you think about how we're assessing and deciding how to best present our collection or our website, it requires all the various experts within the organization. That is for sure, which is why I underscored the notion of internal communications being so important. The structure agenda, you've already heard me say that. I'm going to say it one more time, right? I can't stress enough of having, say it again, and then say it once more, right? So everyone understands, like, again, here are the set of milestones this project is working for. Here are the goals and expectations that we have. When you do have a meeting, there's a level of clarity as to, are we discussing, are we deciding? You can provide a level of specificity, which is really useful, right? It has to be fun. It has to be fun. If you don't have fun doing this, like then it's just stressful. And then it really is just about therapy, right? So the idea, and I think that in a way, you want to keep reminding yourself and those who you're working with that you want this to be a fun, enjoyable experience. And I get it. It's not always going to be fun. There's going to be lots of complications into it. But as I think, I'm sure many of you can attest, a redesign, for example, does not happen all the time. We have been fortunate enough to work with museums where we had people who had been working at a particular museum for 20 plus years who had never gone through a redesign, right? So it's a very big deal. So clearly that can carry some weight on it. On the other hand, it's a heck of an opportunity. And again, I'm going to sort of hit on some of those opportunities later, but I think it's a good reminder that as important it is to have an agenda and have a structure and have a level of clarity around the teams. It's also important to be, to own up and want to have it be a fun experience, right? And forming that team is so critical. I've already sort of highlighted this, right? But It's not just about technology folks, right? It's about lots of different people coming together. You need all those perspectives, right? And one of those perspectives, which I appreciate, isn't so much around team, but it's more about data points, right? It's like, well, what does the audience want, right? That's where the analytics comes in. One of the things that it's a kind of a scary, dry word, right? But audit, the notion of an audit, I cannot stress enough. And again, I kind of put that underneath the pre-production umbrella. I cannot stress enough how important an audit can be as you begin to move towards doing a redesign, right? The best way to figure out where you're going is to know where you are today. And that's what an audit can help you do, right? And the notion of an audit, right? It's not, it can be clearly about technology. Okay, well, what systems do you have? Are you using WordPress? Are you using Drupal? Yes, you need to know those things. What types of processes are you doing? How are you moving your collection information into your website to get published online, right? Okay, got it. So you want to take an audit of those various things. But, and I might argue more important than all of that is more about content audit. Like what stories are you telling? What type of information are you providing? And how is that organized? And sort of understand how is it being used, right? So here comes that word again, more, and that has more, I put that again, sort of in the context of analytics. So now you can, use many different forms of analytics of understanding how that content is being absorbed and better understood by your audience, right? So that all of that information becomes enormously important, right? Before you start working on that project. I'm going to stop talking a second. I'm handing it off to Eileen in a minute. But I just want to say the other thing I wanted to mention is this notion of ideation, right? So it is when you think about of like, what do you want to do? Well, there's 35,000 museums in this country, right? We have an enormous number of colleagues here in the US and lots of different places. And again, I think I've got a few examples later, but like, right, the Milwaukee Art Museum, Detroit Institute of Art. I know those two fairly recently. Oh, the Getty just redid their collection pages, right? There are examples of fairly new web presence, of examples of really interesting, really good websites from our colleagues from our museum. Go there and learn from how and look at and see what the end product is. Allowing yourself to do that horizon scan, right? It allows for you to then sort of absorb it and then refine it and or make it your own within your organization. So this idea of like, how do you, it's not just about imitation, right? It's about how do you find it and then find that combination and find that transformation that you can have. Those types of things are really helpful. And I've kind of already said this already. You can tell that I'm a big fan of the notion of pre-production and brainstorming. But boy, if you allow yourself to do that, to do that horizon scan and really get jazzed and motivated by things that you're seeing out there, right? That brainstorming process, first of all, it's infectious with your, and it allows for you to connect and build a really strong shared vision with your colleagues and with the entire organization. It's fun. See, there's that word again. It's fun to do that, right? And the other thing I just wanted to note about brainstorming too is that the thing that I also like about it, as much as you need a redesign to be a group project, right? It's about an interaction of your colleagues. There are times where you can do divergent thinking and you can do convergent thinking, right? There's plenty of times where people can go and on their own, do their own set of research, right? Do their own sets of, have them sort of take their point of view and their perspective, understand kind of where they're coming from, but then bring it back to the group and allow for a more enriched conversation. So brainstorm, I cannot underscore the fact that it's not just about, all right, let's build a new website and move on. It's not about that. It's about, it's a transformative experience of really finding and, really connecting with that brainstorming capabilities and allowing for you and the entire organization to move forward by presenting the content different, looking different, all of these positive things. Sort of last but not least, I just want to mention the notion of competition, because the reality is if you're doing this project, any of these projects, and boy, this is something that I've probably been saying for pushing 20 years, right? This is, people are sitting on their couch for like pushing 7 hours, right? So my guess is those who are listening right now, they already know that, right? And for those who aren't listening, it's probably a really uncomfortable thing to go into a room, into a meeting at a museum and say, oh, and by the way, right? If the people aren't walking in our galleries today, they're probably sitting on the couch surfing online. I get how there's a level of anxiety around that, but the reality is it's true. And it needs to be kind of, again, embedded in the project, sort of understand that like, oh, right. One of the reasons why we're embarking on this redesign is because we, the museum, want to be where the people are. And where the people are happen to be on a couch for 7.5 hours, for pushing 7 hours a day. So that's the kind of thing that we want to sort of, again, sort of build a level of fun and a level of understanding so that you ultimately can build this remarkable, usable, interesting, experience, online experience for the user. All right, I talked way too much. Eileen, I'm passing it to you. Here we go.
Thank you, Jack. I think you talked the right amount. And thank you, Alex, for the introduction. I'm happy to be here. It's nice to be awake at this hour because usually I'm working on Qatar hours. So this is a nice change for me. So first of all, I have worked on several, as a content person, I've worked on several website redesign projects at different institutions. Today, I'm talking more specifically about the kind of storytelling aspect that is often something that happens after a collection becomes available online. So for me, this is the fun part. As Jack was saying, I agree, it has to be fun. Because also if it's not fun for you and it's not fun for your team, it's definitely not going to be fun for an audience, because I feel like that comes through very clearly, even when you think it doesn't. So I just would like to echo Jack's feeling about that. So for me, the fun part after the redesign, after the collection goes online, which it should be in an ideal world, is that you can then use the collection as the starting point for amazing storytelling and so many different kinds of stories. I think, Jack, you can go to the next slide. My first question that I think about a lot is because the format and the platforms and the delivery mechanism and all the different channels, they're constantly changing. Jack and I have both witnessed many, many changes in how storytelling happens digitally. But the consistency is what we're looking for, I think, in terms of crafting interesting digital content and stories. And there is consistency. It doesn't matter what the channel is. There are certain things that are going to be always relevant. On the next slide. So for me, this is really like, these are the things that are consistent about any story, any format, any delivery. Find the hook. What is it that is going to lure people in? Whether that is an audio feature, whether it's an interactive visual feature, whether it's just text, even just text needs a hook. You need to tell people why they're going to read this, why they should care about it. And I say people are self-centered, but I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean that obviously people need to know what is in it for them, right? Why are they going to engage with your content? And that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. We're all in some way, we want to know, like, how does this relate to my life? What can I get out of it? And then I think probably one of the hardest things for people in our field, I think, is the focus on one takeaway. And this is hard because everybody that we work with, all the subject matter experts, all the educators, everybody, the curators, everyone is a genius and they have so much information. And they have so much to say about every single possible work of art in the collection. But to be realistic, focusing on one takeaway really helps narrow it down, helps focus the story. And if your reader or consumer or the audience, honestly, if they come away with one takeaway from a piece of content, that's a win, I think. It's very similar to what we do with gallery labels, right? You can't put everything on a gallery label, so you have to keep it focused. Be kind to your audience. So for me, that means don't make them feel like they haven't done their homework, because there's nothing worse, I think, than making people feel like they don't have access to what you're trying to communicate. So that's just an exercise in making sure that I think you should probably do some user testing with your content and make sure that it's at the right level for whatever your goal is, whatever your target audience. I want to reiterate what Jack said about clarity, because I think having clarity of your goals and your audience and what success will look like for you will help you frame the story from the very beginning. And actually, by the way, I should say that all of the things that Jack, you said about the project and the preparation, that all applies even to an individual story. I think that it goes down to the micro level. So from the macro level for a huge project, yes, you need all of that preparation, but you also need to do that for individual content pieces and stories in order for them to be effective and interesting. The amount of content that ends up in the finished product is probably 2% of the amount of research or work that you've put into it. So it's all about preparation. Okay, so every object or work of art can spark almost an infinite number of stories. And again, this is sort of about the takeaway. Pick one. You don't have to give everyone the whole book in one short story, right? So pick one and keep it as short as it can be. That's the next bullet point. Again, to keep it focused and keep the audience engaged and keep it moving. Being accessible in every way. This means not just technical accessibility, but it also means being accessible to anybody from any background, any audience, anywhere in the world, any language, ideally. So this is our responsibility, I think, is to create the internet that we want to see, right? So we need to be accessible in every possible way. And this could involve having other people help you with an audit to make sure that you're doing content that's accessible, fully accessible technically, and also just in terms of audience reach. Play nicely with subject matter experts. Okay, this also kind of goes in one of the challenge buckets, I would say, because in any project like this, you're going to be working with subject matter experts, and they are the experts, okay? But if you're the digital expert, you need to help them understand where their subject matter expertise and your subject matter expertise can meet, and you can find a happy compromise between something that they might be thinking of as an 800-page catalog text. How does that translate into a 1 to 2 minute digital experience, right? So you have to respect their expertise, but you also have to be confident in your own expertise and come to the table prepared to defend your recommendations and your suggestions, and then have a nice back and forth with them. And I think, in most cases, you end up with something that works for everyone. And finally, have a distribution plan, because whatever you're doing, unless you have, and I think this also goes with Jack's internal comms piece, if your own social media team or email newsletter team or marketing team or internal comms team don't know what you're up to and don't know why it's exciting and why they should be sharing it, your project will not have the reach and the success that it should, because no matter how brilliant it is, if it doesn't get in front of people that are sitting on their couch for 7 hours a day, you won't know. You won't know what worked and what didn't. And it also makes it very hard to do analytics if you haven't done equal distribution for different projects, because then you can't compare apples to apples. So just I would say, I can't stress that enough, is make sure when you start the project or the story or the digital experience project, whatever it is, make sure that you know how it's going to be shared. Okay, that's the biggest slide I have. The other ones, okay, so structure is your friend. Yes, I agree 100% with that, Jack. Take advantage of templates and components. So these are examples of work that I did as a freelancer, not while I was at the Met, but more recently as a freelancer. The Met had this amazing setup of what they called exhibition primers or permanent collection primers. And they had a set of templates that were developed in-house, but they invited me to write some actual stories and content based on special exhibitions and or permanent collection. So one was for the American Wing reinstallation, one was for Buddhist art in the Asian Wing. This is the American Wing one. And this is just an example of taking advantage. So all of the works in this are permanent collection works. So they can link back and forth to the collection online. But this was just a way to get people to look at the collection in a new way, because it was being reinstalled and it was also being reconsidered. So this was a fun project. The next one was for Alice Neal. This was a temporary exhibition, but it was also interesting timing, because it was right when New York was going through the worst of the pandemic. So the kind of lens for the story seemed like a natural fit to talk about, you know, why does somebody love New York? Because it wasn't a great time to be in New York, but I think that this really resonated, and it matched the artworks perfectly, because Alice Neal's work was really a love letter to New York City. So that was an interesting project. The next one was actually the most recent one I did for the Met, which was exploring the Buddhist art collection at the Met. And I want to say that for each of these projects, and the next one as well, my role was to just gather all the different materials that they wanted to highlight, starting with the objects. It always starts with the art, right? So start with the artworks, and then do a ton of research on what the curators have already written, what exists elsewhere, what's already been discussed, and then come up with creative proposals for basically an angle, a story angle. And for each of these, I proposed 3 distinct angles, and then working with the team at the Met, the in-house team at the Met, and the curators, narrowed it down to 1. I just want to say, for anyone who's in this position where you have to pitch 3 different things, make sure that you like each one of them, because if you pitch one that you don't actually like, you will definitely end up having to work on it.
Totally. That's the
So
one you're doing,
yeah,
for sure. Yeah.
so definitely only propose things that you feel are exciting and quality and will be fun to work on, because throwing in 2 that you think, oh, well, they'll never go for them, that can backfire. So this one, this was for the Medici Portraits and Politics exhibition. This one was, I don't have a favorite, but it may be one of the ones I like very much. So this one was fun because there were 3 totally different directions that I proposed, and this one actually was the one that I wanted them to pick, and they picked it. So it was great, because basically it tied the Medici kind of patronage system and the works with a kind of influencer aesthetic. So it was all about, these were the influencers of their time, and how did they use art to kind of solidify their influence, and basically imagining that, you know, Cosimo was an Instagram influencer. So it was a really fun project.
Wait, so
Uh,
I have
yeah,
to interrupt you. I have to
yeah,
interrupt you because
please.
I actually get an opportunity to tell you and then everyone listening, like, this honestly is one of the best things that I have seen, truthfully. And it's not just because you're sitting, I'm telling you, I use this personally as inspiration, and I absolutely share it with all those who I work with, because the way that you are taking paintings that are pushing 500 years old and being able to make them relevant to today is honestly it's fantastic. It's a great example of storytelling today. And you know, for the 15 years plus that I worked at the Getty, the idea of being able, like, how do you tell that story in a short, concise, fun way? This is it. Like, you knocked it out of the park with that.
Oh,
So
thank you.
it's really, I really encourage everyone you will be inspired, I promise you, by going there and sort of looking at it as a model of what you can get done, because it's really remarkable.
Thank you. And I should say that this was a team effort. I came up with the pitch and the storytelling, but the design and a lot of the functionality and all of that is the Mets team. So I don't want to act like I did everything, but the story, the pitch, it was really fun to work on.
It's a great example of all that collaboration. I'm glad
Yeah,
you said that. It's really cool.
exactly.
Yeah.
And honestly, even every project I think we've worked on generally is a team effort. This one also, I do want to say that it's just, again, about the structure as your friend, because as a storyteller, it can be very daunting to just have a blank screen or a blank page. But when you know what the template options are, you can actually, it helps shape the story, because you know, okay, here I can do a slideshow, here I can do a hotspot, here I can do a video, here I can do audio. So actually having those guardrails or those limitations in place can really benefit keeping the story on focus and targeted.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Jack, I think you added this.
I did. I added this because I can't help but talk about this. I just also wanted to share, and this is a bit adjacent to all the points that you were making. But what's cool about what you all were able to build for that primer, right, is it's in essence, it's one page. It's a destination. It tells a really, again, a really compelling story. But because of it being one page and a strong storytelling, it then allows the Met, and I would argue that as a great model for lots of other museums, as a way to, you can now, right, it helps with the search engine, the SEO, right? So you allow that to be captured and found in a fairly easy way. It allows you to then use other digital distribution channels, right? Social media, in this example, to end up pointing people from a social media channel to the website, right? And so it allows for the ecosystem to grow and to expand, right? Again, we're no longer in a world where it's just the website. It's the website plus all these other channels that we all have. And so again, I sort of use the Medici Portraits and Politics site as part of that ecosystem. And I think it's really interesting to see how it gets embedded and used across those different channels.
Yeah, that's a good point also, because since this one was a temporary exhibition, this digital feature lives on even after the exhibition itself has closed. So it's kind of a nice, it's a digital artifact, but it's still relevant. And that also goes into the thinking for the storytelling, because you don't want it to be just a guide to the exhibition, right? You want it to be something that someone can enjoy, whether or not they're coming to the exhibition. It does work as a incentive for people to come to the exhibition, but if they can't come, if they live somewhere else, if they've missed it, they could still enjoy this digital feature after the fact from wherever they are. Okay, and so my last slide, no, I have 2 more slides. Couple more slides. So this is a more recent example of my current work at Qatar Museum. So This is just one of the principles, is to mix it up. And this means that, you know, your audience wants different things at different times. So we try to balance a very lightweight piece, like a recap of the World Cup coming to Doha and what that meant for the museums. And then we balance it with a very in-depth and long read piece that was an interview with a well-known scholar talking about nomadic pastoralism, which is not going to be the same audience necessarily that read the, you know, 10 things to know about visiting Qatar museums, but it might be, you know, because people have different modes when they're looking to visit, when they just want to do something different. Also, trying to get different contributors from different fields and mix it up, get different experts. Massimiliano Gioni was one of the curators for this Valentino exhibition that just closed in Doha, and so he contributed. Jeff Koons has contributed. Different contributors help spread the mix around a little bit and also help with distribution. And then these are just examples of what we're trying to do with collection highlights. This is like taking an individual. So say you have the online collection, but then you want to do different stories about things that are in the online collection. So taking individual works of art or objects and really doing one kind of angle deep dive on them, mixing it up between sports, contemporary art, and the Damascus room, which is a beautiful period room from the 1800s. So just keeping it, you know, keeping a mix and keeping an eye on your overall mix, I would say. I think challenges is next, Zach.
It is, yes,
Yeah.
which are hurdles, roadblocks, and dumpsters. Let's go right into we'll go from right into this into challenges.
Yeah. Okay. So these were a couple from me, and they really align with what Jack was saying about the internal buy-in. For me, is very related to the internal comms, because you have to get people excited about what you're doing. You have to get them to understand why you're doing it, and to get them to understand what's interesting about it, because they are your first audience and they are also your best kind of ambassadors. So getting the internal buy-in. Budgets can be a problem, obviously, for everyone. And especially when you have things like, if you want to hire a writer who's known and you want to pay them fairly because they are professionals, and that can sometimes be a challenge. Also, just the nature of how those contracts can work can be a challenge. Like, how do you pay someone to write one article for you? Sometimes museums are not set up to do that kind of, you know, piecemeal assignment work. So that's the external contributors. Sometimes when you have external contributors, they're amazing, but they can also be hard to manage because they don't work for the same organization as you. And you just have to really have to manage them and be hands-on. Sometimes image or asset licensing fees can be an issue if you wanted to include multimedia or stuff that you don't already own. So that's something that's worth checking. Design and development. I think maybe did I put that, or did you put that, Jack? I probably put it, but just as a note to say that the process can be a challenge because it requires many, many rounds, and everybody knows this. It requires, there are limitations, right? Sometimes you get the answer that the CMS won't let you do that, right? So that's the thing, you just have to work within that structure. The subject matter expert relationship is so important. Have a healthy relationship with them. You need to build trust. They need to know that you're not going to dumb down what their content is. And then, but at the same time, the senior staff make something go viral, kind of vague assignment that we get sometimes in digital. And finally, distribution and marketing. I've said that several times, but those are some of the challenges that I have faced. Right.
Yeah. And for me, you know, what I immediately come to when I think of a challenge, right, is, and in a way you've sort of highlighted it in each one of those bullet points, is that you have to be able to absorb the unforeseen, right? You have to be able to sort of, again, I think that that's one of the reasons why the structure is so useful. If you have the structure in place and you allow yourself to have fun, that when something unforeseen, complication, challenge, right? You insert the problem, right? It allows everyone to be able to manage it and to understand like how to solve, right? How do you use decision making to help solve what that challenge might be? And so, and then I'll just transition into opportunities. But this is I'm gonna jump up on the proverbial platform here and just like a shout out to project management, because I don't think I properly put a slide together specifically around project management. But boy, if you forget everything that we've now talked about for the past pushing 50 minutes, you need to have a project manager and some buy-in to project management, right? I cannot stress enough the colleagues that I worked with at the Getty, the role that they play. And Alex, you know this better than all of us here at BPOC, right? That the reality is that is a hard job to negotiate. You are the negotiator as a project manager. You're negotiating for everybody, right? And on top of that, not only are you negotiating on a one-to-one sort of peer-to-peer type of, but then you also need to represent the project in its entirety, right? And so the notion of like, how do you manage milestones and expectations falls on the project manager's shoulders. And that is hard to do. So if you are a project manager, well done. If you know a project manager, then give them a pat on the back and say, you're doing a great job, because it is really hard to do. And I think it sometimes gets misunderstood as to how complicated that can be. And then I'm going to stop ranting on this. It becomes even more complicated in the museum world when you have cultural heritage, when you're thinking about, right? It isn't just about, okay, we're trying to sell more tickets or get more people to come into the museum. Clearly that's important. But the project manager and the entire sort of structure of a project, it's also about, well, what's the experience like? How are we making them feel, right? These are all really important to our industry. And again, I submit to you that the project manager role ends up helping negotiate and navigate that. So well done to all of you who are doing that.
I agree. And also, I think it's similar to the structure being your friend. Process is your friend, and the project manager is the one who helps keep the process on track. And unfortunately, they're undersung because usually they make things run so smoothly that people don't even notice. But that's because they're doing a great job.
Totally. Exactly right. This is going to feel kind of like a hard left turn, but a couple other things that again, when you're thinking about these projects, and Eileen, I love the fact that you talked about like whether or not you're doing like a redesign of 100,000 pages or a redesign of 50 pages, or you're building a really cool, exhibition page, right? What becomes really useful is also, to think about kind of where your audience is, right? And I just wanted to sort of share this super quick sort of graphic because it can help sort of ground folks to when you're starting to begin that brainstorming and thinking about it. And this idea of like thinking through like, well, right, if they're far away, they're going to interact with the storytelling and with that message in a completely unique way, opposed to them standing right in front of the work of art, right? Now this crazy thing called the cell phone, someone can be doing either one of those things. They can be 8,000 miles away, or they can be 8 feet away. And I think that it's just helpful for us as storytellers. And as we start thinking about the utility of a website or these collection pages, it becomes really important for us to kind of think about that proximity and to help us kind of build out, the right way of telling those stories. Again, I just threw this in here because I love this idea of the sort of customer, the audience, the user checklist, right? It's really helpful just to realize that making something functional or reliable or usable, right? That's important. You could be telling a fantastic story, but if it's in Flash, they're not going to be able to see it now, right? They could have seen it 15, 20 years ago, but if the accessibility, if the presentation is awkward or is unable to be read or seen, you lose a level of value. So I like this idea of sort of acknowledging that you need to make sure things work well and are reliable, again, from a technology standpoint, from a design standpoint, from a story standpoint, and it really does help sort of build momentum and ultimately and sort of increase the value of what you're trying to do. I think that was, and that really, this is, I mean, Eileen, I don't know, I think maybe everyone can at this point can kind of agree to this, right? The notion of success is going to be complicated. It is. That's the fact of the matter is there's going to be unforeseens and we're going to constantly get things thrown in our way. If you have the structure, you're good to go. And you'll be able to absorb that and have fun along the way. I think that's that's
it. If anyone has any questions or comments.
Yeah, thank you, Jack and Eileen. We don't have any from the audience yet. And I know I said earlier that I didn't have any. I lied. I thought of some. Going back to what you were talking about around design and development, Eileen, one issue that I know we've all, I'm sure, run into is communication with the vendor, whoever you're working with, whether it's, a web developer or a design agency, and communicating your needs in a way that vendor actually hears you and listens and designs the product that meets your expectations. Do you have, any kind of like recommendations or advice for that? I know Jack and I especially ran into that issue with a Balboa Park specific project last year, and he heard a lot of venting from me in particular around that particular issue.
Yeah, my advice echoes something that Jack said about internal comms, which is you cannot over communicate. So I think when you're working with a developer or like an external design or development partner, you're engaging in a serious relationship with them, I think, because you need to be communicating beyond probably what you might think, and just checking in. I mean, that's where it's used. I do like the methodology of having the daily reviews, the daily check-ins, this, discussing the sprint planning and all of that is really, really helpful. It feels like a lot of work to do all those meetings and all of those checking in, but it just saves so much aggravation later if you can check and iterate and check and iterate. So I would just say over communicate.
Yeah, thank you. And we just got a question from the audience. Any advice for smaller staffs that don't have someone with the capacity or authority to serve as a true project manager? This is a good one.
It's a great question.
You can go ahead, Jack. I have thoughts, but
no, you go first.
Okay. My just immediate reaction is no matter how small the team or the staff, even if there's not someone whose job title is project manager, then the role needs to be assigned for a specific project. So it may feel like, well, you don't have the bandwidth to do it, but in terms of the roles and responsibilities, someone has to be in that role. And even if it's temporary or even if it's part-time, I just don't think it can work without someone assigned that role. And also that other people know that they're assigned to that role so that they will be respected and that they can actually get the work done. That's just my thought, because I've worked on very small teams too. And it's not so much about having one person always who always does that, but someone per project has to have that role, I think.
I'm glad you said it first before me. Yes, that's exactly. Unfortunately, I couldn't agree with you more. You need to have that role. I will say I have one additional comment, which is sort of unusual, which is right there. We talk a lot about, having lots of meetings, which I think we all can attest to. We all know what that's like, right? And we create these project teams. And I think it's this question reminds me is that a project team should come together for the project, and then it can go away, right? And then another project team can form, right? And so don't get me wrong, it can be useful to have a level of consistency on similar projects with similar team members. I think, again, there's a level of efficiency with that. But the reality is, certainly within smaller organizations, that may not be possible, right? And so the idea that you can sort of pass that role and responsibility to other people along the way I think that makes a lot of sense for perhaps the very things you're talking about, which is it can be time consuming. There is a level of investment that's required when you're in that role. And so, yeah, people, we have to be able to share that. I will say that the one thing I'm not doing, which I hope maybe is being noticed, is that what can't solve it is technology, right? There are lots of different project management software things out there. And right, the reality is, sure, an Excel doc can be useful if it's like, here are the things I need to do in a list. Okay, great. If that's the best way of capturing the to-dos and the milestones, have at it, do that, right? But I guess what I want to make sure that I sort of say out loud is that, unfortunately, those things can't replace that project management, that project coordination that really does reside with a person and with a role on the team.
Yeah, and I think the idea of the passing that role depending on the project just makes me think how important it is to document processes and workflows. So if one project manager is working on one project, but then the next project is going to be someone else taking that role, it can be so helpful to have a documented kind of workflow procedure that you're not starting from scratch every time, right? Even if you have to change the people. And I agree 100%, it's not a technology problem. It's a roles and responsibilities problem.
A transition plan is absolutely key. Yes, completely agree.
Right, for sure.
We don't have any other questions from the audience just yet, but I do have one more regarding broadcasting that you talked about earlier, Eileen. And the Medici example that Jack brought up, as far as it's still appearing in Google search results and getting your project seen with SEO and keywording. If you guys have any recommendations or advice for that too, I'd love to hear it.
Well, in that case, I would say the Met had experts in SEO and keywords working on it. And I, as the author of the content, I was also asked as part of my assignment to write some promotional copy for it. So I think that's something that's good when you're working with writers, to include promotional copy as part of the assignment, because you can't do an assignment like this anymore without having some promo text, right? So basically they say, okay, we need a promo copy for the email, we need promo copy for search results or for social media, blah, blah, blah. But just make sure that someone on the team is up to speed with SEO and keywords, and work with the writer to craft the right promo copy.
Great, thank you. All right, we're down to the last minute. Any final thoughts?
Well, I'll only respond in a slightly inflammatory way, perhaps, which is, my guess is we're becoming closer and closer to ChatGPT being able to write some of those metadata, items for
which
us.
I would welcome 100%.
There we go. So it's not so inflammatory, is it? So there we go.
I think it's another subject, but I would love to dig into it because
Will be having a question on that. Yes.
I meant to say that a number of the images that used in sort of the presentation there were made from Midjourney, just to say out loud. So there we go. So we're working towards that right now.
Nice.
Well, thank you both. Really appreciate your time today and sharing your experiences. Thank you everyone for joining for this latest episode. Next month we will be back on May 8th. with the Indianapolis Museum of Art at Newfields to talk about their multi-year project to develop a new collections portal. Stay tuned for more information. Have a great rest of your day, and I hope everyone has a wonderful week. Thank you all.
Bye. Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank you.